Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before I get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about, and the only thing I really wanted to cover is that there was a pretty important campaign that I did miss out on last week. I did know it was launching this month, but I didn't know exactly when, but it happened to launch last week and I just really want to cover this one, and this is for the Dice Tower 2023 campaign. And I know I'm not the only one that they helped get into the board gaming world, so if they are a team that you want to support, this is your chance to go ahead and support them. And they also offer a whole bunch of different promo cards for games that you might already own, and for myself this is usually the area that I gravitate to when I back these campaigns, and I haven't had a chance to go through them all so far, but I'm already seeing a few games that look interesting like ISS Vanguard, Oathswarm, Flamecraft, and a ton of others. So if this looks interesting to you, if you want to support them, definitely take a look through their promos as well as their other offerings. You'll be able to find something that you like, and you'll also get that nice warm cozy feeling of supporting a team that has always been here for the board game community. And I'll leave a link to their campaign in the description below. As always, there are a ton of games to cover every single month and every single week, so I do work with Alex over at Board Game Co to make sure that we're providing you with all the most up-to-date info as possible. So if you like these sort of lists, definitely go ahead and check out his channel as well, because there's a ton of more content that I don't cover that he does. So if you want reviews or playthroughs or even just chats around different topics within the board game community, he's definitely a channel that you'll want to check out. And we do have quite a few games to cover this week. It looks like the games are really starting to pick up, so let's get into them and check out the campaigns. And the first campaign we have launches on January 16th, and this one's called Arborea. And this plays 1 to 5 players and takes about 90 to 120 minutes to play. And this one is a Euro-style worker placement game, but also a tile placement game where you're going to be trying to build up a certain type of ecosystem of all sorts of different terrain, and then trying to attract different fantastical creatures in order to score victory points. But something that makes this one really interesting is that you're actually going to be able to place your workers out onto a tile that sits on top of a track out on the main board. And the way that this works is that you'll actually be able to use actions in order to move this tile across the track, which will move all the workers that are on top of that tile. So you're actually going to be able to move multiple workers with a single action, whether or not they're your workers or another player's. This creates a really interesting dynamic where you're trying to take advantage of that for yourself, but it also intertwines all the players' decisions just a little bit, creating a little bit more interaction. And these tracks are known as pilgrimage tracks, where your workers are going to be going out and exploring, gathering different biome materials in order to formulate their ecosystem. And on a player's turn, they can choose to put a worker out on one of these pilgrimage tracks, or instead they can choose to move a pilgrimage track forward 1 space. But you can pay if you want to push it forward an additional space. Each of these tracks also has a few spaces that have an associated icon, and if you place your worker onto one of those icons, it's going to move you up the multiplier track that matches that icon. And this of course will help you score more victory points throughout the game. But another really interesting aspect here is that anytime a tile is moved along the track, if you have a worker on that tile and that worker stops adjacent to one of these trails leading off the track, then you can move your worker off of that track onto the starting position of that trail completely for free, whether or not it is your turn. But if it is your turn, and after you've made the decision whether to place a worker or move one of the tiles, you can then move up to 2 of your workers that are currently on a trail further down that trail, and you're going to be gaining bonus actions for each of the icons that you move across. And these actions can do different things like gain you ecosystem cards or the biome resources in order to try and complete them, or they can also gain you creatures that you can then put into your ecosystem, or they can even make new creatures available in the future. There's a few other actions here you can do as well, but if you are able to complete any of those ecosystem cards, then you can start putting them into your tableau to create your overall ecosystem. And the other players don't have to wait for you to do this. They can go ahead and start their turn while you're planning out your tableau. But one last thing before the end of your turn is that you're going to be gaining victory points for any of the unused resources that you're able to create, and you'll also be able to move any of the tracks that your villagers are still on. The game continues like this, and then you're going to be scoring victory points based on the ecosystems that you've created, along with the victory points that you've gained throughout the game, and the player with the most victory points wins the game. And of course, if you're interested in this one or any others, I have links to all these campaigns in the description below. And the next campaign we have launches on January 17th, and this one's called AEGIS Combining Robots Season 2. And this plays 1 to 6 players. It takes about 25 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a standalone expansion to the original game. And this is an area control game where you're going to be building up a team of 5 robots, potentially combining robots together to make stronger robots, and overall trying to defeat the other players. The game offers a few different modes of play, whether you want to draft or just select your robots at the start of the game. And then at the start of a player's turn, they're going to be gaining energy based on the sum of the points of the robots that they still have in play. They'll then be spending those points in order to move their robots along on a main board, and then also to activate their special abilities. Each robot has a maximum movement amount that will limit your movement depending on which robot you're activating, and then their ability might debilitate or damage your opponents, and it might have some special effects that could involve dice rolling, but then each robot also has a passive ability that's always in effect when you're using that robot. But a really neat aspect of this game is that anytime that you have 2 robots side by side, if their cards share a letter that's located in the top left of the card here, you can actually combine those robots together to make a more powerful robot that shares their attributes. But your timing with this is really important here, and you'll really want to consider that because anytime that you combine 2 robots, it's going to give them a full refresh, removing any debilitating effects and restoring their health up to full. So you really just want to be doing this when you really have to, and to try and save some of your robots that you think you might lose. And if you want to know more, I have links in the description below. And also launching on the 17th, we have Coal Baron, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 75 minutes to play. And this is a competitive Euro strategy game of a game that already exists. And this campaign is going to be offering you a deluxeified version of the game with the same rules, but with upgraded components. And if you're not familiar with this game, each player is going to be starting with some starting resources, as well as 3 starting orders that you're going to be trying to complete in order to gain victory points, and a mineshaft board that has different levels for each type of resource. You're going to be using that to harvest the resources in order to complete those orders. And the game plays over 3 rounds with players placing workers out onto different areas of the board in order to perform the associated action, and you can place workers to a spot that was already used. You just have to place an additional worker there. And these different locations can allow you to do actions like gaining money to buy things, which you'll also have to spend an action in order to do, and the things you can buy are minecarts to harvest more resources, or you can even gain new orders. If you did complete any orders on a previous turn, there's an action spot that allows you to cash those in for their victory points. And then there's also a location that gains you mining actions that you'll be able to use over on your mineshaft board. And this one's really interesting because you're going to need those action points to do anything on your mineshaft board, like move the elevator up and down through different levels, or load or unload resources from a certain level onto your elevator, or to load those resources off the elevator onto one of your orders. And completing those orders will gain you victory points, but it also matters which order that you complete at the different points in the game, because you'll actually be able to hang on to those orders, and there's bonus victory points that you can gain for completing the certain types. You're going to be scoring these at the end of each round, but something that's really nice about it is that you actually get to keep all the orders throughout the entire game and score them for every single round after you've achieved that order. And the player with the most victory points after the 3rd round wins the game. And the next campaign, also launching on the 17th, is Once Upon a Line. This plays 1 to 5 players and takes about 120 to 180 minutes to play. And this one is my own personal pick of the week. And I always love to see when my own personal pick is completely different than what the Discord selects, because this one got only 6 votes. And whenever I see this, I just always feel like this is my opportunity to prove to you why this game deserves your attention. And the first thing I want to say on that is that this is a campaign style game, but it's unlike anything that you've ever seen before, and it makes use of a component that I've never seen done in board gaming, and it also does it in a way that looks really, really fun. But before I scare you away with that campaign game tag, don't worry, there's not a whole bunch of miniatures and a massive 20,000 hour campaign for this one. This one looks really accessible, and it doesn't have an anxiety-inducing amount of components to go along with it. And something that you may not expect is that at the core of this game, it is a word game. But the way that this game works is at the start of each chapter, you're going to be using something known as the Grid of Destiny. And there's a whole bunch of these offered in the game, and you only use each one once as you move through the campaign. And in fact, this does have a little bit of a legacy element because you can only use each of these once. Because similarly to a lottery ticket, you're actually going to be scratching off sections of these boards in order to reveal different words and letters and icons that could help or harm you throughout the game. But on the backs of each of these grids of destiny, it's going to provide dialogue to move you along with the story, and it's also going to give you a goal that you and the fellow players are trying to achieve, because this one is a cooperative game. And this will usually start you out with scratching out a section of the board that's marked with these arrows. And whenever you are able to scratch out an entire word that you're able to read, you'll know indeed that this is the full word, because they use horizontal and vertical lines to mark the end and start of each word. So whenever you see both of those with a complete word, you know that you've scratched the entire thing. And when you do scratch out a full word, you're going to take the first 3 letters and then find the card that matches those letters. And these could do different things like introduce new characters, which also come with their own words of power, that if you're able to find other words on the board that share those letters, you're going to be crossing off those letters in order to unlock special abilities. Or instead of introducing a character, these could do other things like introduce a riddle card where players are going to be trying to guess a specific word, and you can use clues to help gain letters towards that word, but those do come at a cost. And of course, once you think that you've guessed that word, you'll be able to scratch all the letters to reveal the actual word, and if it matches up with what you've guessed, then you'll be rewarded for that, and if not, you will be penalized. But the nice thing about getting characters is that for each character, you're going to be getting an action board and some associated action tiles. And each tile is going to count as a single action. You'll be able to put that out on the board. You'll be able to scratch all the letters, extending it from a word that you've already solved, and using those tiles of different lengths to try and reveal more letters that might help you find other words that you're looking for, or to try to complete words in the spots that you think a word might exist. And once you've completed all your actions, time moves forward, which is represented by scratching one of these squares in the line of tragedy. And each time that one of these gets scratched, it's going to reveal some sort of negative penalty that is going to come into effect that might limit your actions or harm the players in some way. And once you've scratched all of them and you get to the end and there's no more left to scratch, you're just going to be losing victory points for each additional line of tragedy that should have been scratched beyond that. And there are many other ways that you'll be scratching these lines of tragedies throughout the game. But in deducing where those words might be on the board and then discovering those words, you're going to have that excitement of discovering more of the story, or discovering new opportunities or items or characters, or even some smaller quests along the way that'll help you reach your main goal. Players are going to be getting victory points depending on how well they're able to do all this, and these are going to be tallied up across the different chapters that you play, and the score that you get on each of these and at the very end is going to be an indicator of how well you performed on the game. And if you are even just mildly interested in what I've presented to you so far, I highly recommend checking out the video by Rolling Solo, because they give you a really good understanding of how the game plays with some examples and tutorials. And there's a lot more to this game than what I can cover in just the few minutes here, so definitely check out that video, and of course you can sign up to the campaign to get notified on launch if you want to find out more when the campaign actually launches. And you can find links to the campaign in the description below. Also launching on the 17th, we have Hollywood 1947, and this plays 1 to 9 players and takes about 20 to 40 minutes to play. And this one is a social deduction game of creating films that may or may not have some sort of political propaganda. Players are going to be starting the game with a role in secret, which is either a patriot, a communist, or a rising star. If you're a patriot or a communist, you're trying to create 4 films that push your agenda, and you're trying to do that before the opposing team. But if you are a rising star, you're trying to end up with a balance of the two. Players will also gain a role card that will grant them some sort of special ability that they can use throughout the game. Then they're also going to be gaining a hand of influence cards, which is going to allow them to influence the film in one direction or the other. But at the start of each round, all players are going to be rolling a die, and any of the dice that end up with a star on them is going to allow them to play their influence cards on that round. A coming soon card will also be revealed, letting the players know of which movie that they're trying to create, and it may start with influence in one way or the other right off the bat that players are going to have to take advantage of or try to take extra precaution to alleviate. On a turn, you can either use your special ability, re-roll a couple of the dice, and they don't have to be your own, they can actually be other players, or you can choose to swap your ability with one of the unused abilities. After all players have chosen their action, any players that still have a star on the die in front of them are going to be able to play their influence cards onto that film. Then the influence is revealed and added up with the influence already on the film, and then the film is going to be classified as either patriotic or communist, depending on which results in the most. The game continues like this until one of the win conditions are hit, and then that team wins the game. Also launching on the 17th, we have the Zombie One-Shot RPG, and this is going to be offering you a few different scenarios that you can play, as well as STL files that you can print off using a 3D printer. And of course, this one is a zombie survival adventure, but what makes this one special is that the players are actually working together in order to decide their actions, and then everyone's going to roll at the same time to determine the outcome. But within the system, you're not completely at the mercy of the dice, because each player will have their own skills that they'll be able to use to manipulate the outcome of the dice, and the system also does offer a starter page and cheat sheet to allow players to just hit the ground running, and combat doesn't require a whole bunch of extra rolls or saving throws. It's all done with a single roll of the die. And if you want to know more about this one, I got links in the description below. And next, on the 17th, we have Epic Spell Wars of the Battle Wizards Annihilageddon 3 Satanic Panic. And this plays 2 to 5 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a deck builder that can be played as a co-op or a one versus many, with one of the players taking on the role of Satan, trying to drag all the other wonderful people straight to hell. Just like the previous Epic Spell Wars games, this is built upon the Cerberus engine, so you will be familiar with it if you've played any of those previous games, or the DC Comics deck building game that also used that system. But if you're familiar with how deck building games work in general, this is going to be very similar to that, where you're going to be building up and recycling your deck. But the difference with this one is that there's going to be a main deck where you're going to be drawing more cards from, and then there's going to be your legendary deck, which you're going to be drawing fewer cards from, and they are also more costly. But each of the players, as well as Satan himself, are also going to have their own health trackers, and the goal of this game is to try and get your opponent's health to 0 before your own. And something else to note here is that this is compatible with the other Cerberus engine releases, but this is going to introduce new mayhems, familiars, champions, wizards, spells, creatures, and treasures. And if you want to check it out, I got links in the description below. And launching on the 18th, we have a campaign not for a board game, but for something to help you protect your board games, because this campaign is the Sleeve Kings campaign, where you'll be able to get all sorts of sleeves to help protect the cards. And I know that the Sleeve Kings sleeves are some of the best and a lot of gamers' favorite, and even the standard sizes are more microns than a lot of sleeves from other brands. So if you've gotten standard sleeves before and you felt that they were a little on the flimsy side, these ones are going to be a little bit more rigid than those. And if you have as many games as me or more, it's sometimes hard to keep up with all the sleeving, and honestly it's hard to justify sleeving a game if you're not playing it frequently enough. There's basically 2 cases where I definitely sleeve my games. Either it's a game of high value that I really love, that I really don't want to get damaged, or it's a game that just has a bunch of cards in it that get shuffled repeatedly, and shuffling your cards does damage them. Just take a look at my Cosmic Encounter, because it is clearly visible which cards and expansions I had before I decided to sleeve that game. And the nice thing about this campaign is that they've already provided all the different brands and the different offerings that they have at the different prices, so you can go ahead and compare. But of course, I always do recommend doing your own research, see what kind of options there are in your area, if there's any sales or things like that, and decide what's best for you, because it's not an inexpensive thing to go ahead and sleeve your games. A lot of these games have hundreds and hundreds of cards, and you will need multiple packs in order to just sleeve a single game. But if you're interested, the campaign's here, and you can find a link to it in the description below. And launching on the 18th, we have the next iteration and standalone expansion to the Marvel United universe, which is Marvel United Multiverse. And this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 40 minutes to play. And if you haven't played this game before, you're going to be putting together a team of 4 heroes, randomizing a bunch of location tiles where you'll be able to perform different actions, and then you're also going to be choosing an enemy and that enemy's master plan. And you'll be able to mix and match all of these to create almost an endless amount of different scenarios. But what this is going to be adding new to the game is all sorts of different villains across the entire multiverse, as well as different heroes that players will be able to incorporate into their Marvel United experience. But this isn't just an expansion on characters, because you'll also be able to include the newly added equipment cards, which either start with your character at the start of the game or you'll acquire throughout the game, which will allow you to feel more like the character that you're playing in the game. Because if you're playing as one of the many Spider-Mans, you'll be able to use your web slinger, or if you are playing as one of the many Thors, you'll be able to throw your hammer. There's also an improved solo mode added to the game where you can play as a single character, and then the other characters are acting more as a support role, so you don't have to control all the the characters individually. But of course, when expanding into the multiverse, there's going to be some pretty epic opponents, and this expansion will include Galactus into the game, as well as his 4 heralds. And these 4 heralds can be played with Galactus or played individually as their own enemies. The interesting thing about playing with Galactus is that he's not going to jump around the different tiles out on the board. Instead, he's going to be remaining in the center of the board, rotating and influencing the locations that he's looking at. And if you're a fan of the many miniatures from the previous campaigns and how they incorporated the fire, water, and ice effects into the miniatures by using that clear resin, there are going to be more miniatures introduced featuring those really cool effects, and of course these 4 heralds are one of them. One other thing I wanted to mention, because if you are interested in this campaign, you're probably going to be interested in this, and that's that they're also going to be releasing a Spider-Geddon set that's going to be going straight to retail, so this won't be available in the campaign, but you can look forward to it coming out sometime this year to your local retailer. And that's pretty much everything I have for you regarding this campaign, but if you want to know more about how it plays or some of the previous offerings, I did cover this back when they did their X-Men campaign, and I'll just go ahead and roll that footage for you now. Players must complete 2 out of the 3 missions before they can attack the villain, and each villain plays very different from each other and has their own master plan deck that wins them the game if it's ever completed. Players will each play their own hero with their own hero deck, and on their turn they get to play a card which allows them to perform actions based on the icons visible on the card they played and the card that was played by the player before them. This adds another neat layer of cooperation since the card you play will affect the player after you. The Marvel United X-Men makes a few changes to the game. First, it increases the player count by making the villain a playable character. This change also introduces the supervillain and superhero cards, which each have their own trigger conditions and can interfere with other players' turns. Anti-hero characters are also being added to the game, which come with both their own villain master plan deck and a hero deck. We've seen this before with Venom in the previous release, but it looks like Kaman wanted to expand on this idea, and they're now going to be focusing on adding a lot more characters that have that ability. And launching on January 20th, we have Back O Beyond Tales of Blood and Salt. And this is a game for 2 to 4 players. It takes about 60 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a mid-weight Euro where players are competing to become the most renowned pirate. This is a game that plays over 5 rounds, with each round made up of 4 phases. There's the start of round phase where contracts are going to be revealed, ships are going to be added to the board that can be captured by any of the players, and then the tavern's going to be filled with more crew members that you could potentially recruit to your ship. Then there's the preparation phase where players are going to be performing actions by spending time on the island. You're going to be spending your time resource in order to recruit new members to your ship, repair or upgrade your ship, or to do other things like sabotage the other players. And then there's the travel phase where you can attempt to plunder different trading ships, and in the process also raise your dread, morale, reputation, and most importantly your prestige. And a cool thing about the combat in this game is that it's a 3-phase dice-based combat system that does have a push your luck aspect where you can take on higher risks for more rewards or lower risks for more mediocre rewards. But then at the end of each round there's the upkeep phase where you're going to be taking actions to keep or dismiss your crew through food, morale, and rum. And the player with the most prestige at the end of the game wins the game. And also launching on the 20th, we have Scrap, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 150 minutes to play. And this is a competitive area control game that has 0 randomness, so whether you win or lose, you can take full accountability for that. But in this game, players are going to be playing as different robots, and the way that this game works is that you're going to be pre-programming your actions for each turn. You're always going to have 2 cards ready to go, the one that you're going to be playing on this turn, and then the one that you're going to be playing on the following turn. And of course, when you play the card on your current turn, since you always have to have 2 cards in play, you're going to be moving your next card forward and then queuing up the one after that. And whenever you reveal a card, you'll be able to perform the basic action on it for free, but you can also discard a card from your hand of the same type in order to activate its power-up ability. After you've done that, you'll be able to choose a row on the subroutine track and then move your token up on that track. And moving your token up on a track makes you stronger in that specific area and unlocks new cards to add to your hand and new abilities. And the game continues like this, and the player that is able to accumulate the most data by performing different actions or defeating their opponents wins the game. And of course, if you want to know more, the link is in the description below. And that's everything I have for you this week, even though this is normally the part in the video where I have all sorts of giveaways to announce, and we should have some giveaways next week, but it does take some time to get those rolling after the lull in December. But in either case, I hope this video was helpful, and as always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.